welcome to your cathedral at this important time in the life of our nation. It is good to be together. Cathedrals have throughout history, and especially the naves, have been places of community gathering for discussion, debate, reflection, for reminding ourselves in our common humanity that we are committed to the communities of which we are part. And it is in that spirit that we welcome you here this evening. This is your place, and we trust that you feel welcome here this evening. Good to welcome our chair, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Hertfordshire, and our candidates who the chair will introduce this evening, but we warmly welcome you. In the life of the Church of England at this time, our bishops have called for a time of prayer and reflection in this important time, and we are literally praying our part in the life of our nation. Throughout these days, there has been a different focus, and already in these prayers, we have prayed for our communities, as we do this day for families of every nature and kind in the life of our nation, and also for the candidates. From the prophet Jeremiah, "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." So we have been praying, and all our hopes, I am sure, as people of all faiths and none, guide all candidates for office and the leaders of the nations into the ways of peace and justice. This place, in the name of Alban, Britain's first saint and martyr, stands for peace and justice. And so as I, for the only time this evening, have the microphone, want to say welcome to pilgrimage on Saturday, Albans Day. You won't want to be anywhere else but on St Peter's Street and here in your cathedral and Abbey Church. Welcome to you all.
Joe, thank you so much for that wonderful welcome. I have to say, if you'd stayed up there much longer, you would have been getting the votes. As Joe said, I'm Quinton McKellan. I'm the Vice-Chancellor at the University. I'm the referee for this evening. Can I add my welcome and say this is a really important part of the democratic process and one which we cherish. We would love you to be animated, but not too animated. We'd like you to be respectful of the people who have put themselves forward for public service and up for election during the questions and during the conversation that we have afterwards. I'm going to introduce the panel to you, and I'll introduce them in the sequence that they're seated at on the stage here. So we've got Simon Grover to my immediate left here for Greens, Sophia Adams-Batty for Labour, John Dowdall for Reform UK, James Spencer, Conservative, David Morris, Heritage Party, Daisy Cooper, Lib Dem, and Stuart Satterley, Social Democrat. If you'll allow me just a moment to tell you the format for this evening. The positions, incidentally, on the stage have been decided by drawing lots, so it was very democratic. We will have two stewards mingling among you who will have microphones for those who are asking the questions and also for some conversation after each of the topics have been discussed. I should say the debate is being streamed live on the Cathedral YouTube channel, so be aware of that. The questions which we've had, and the questions have been submitted by some of you, they have been selected on the basis of relevance, brevity, and impartiality. We have 8 questions. I doubt if we'll get through all 8 questions because we're going to give each of the candidates the opportunity to speak to each of the questions. The candidates will have 2 minutes maximum. At the end of that 2-minute period, a bell will ring, and we hope that they will at that point stop. If not, I will interject as vigorously and energetically as possible. I will try and alter the sequence that each of the questions is asked of the candidates, and then we'll have a short period for immediate feedback from you for each of the questions. Now, I'm going to ask those who submitted the questions first if they'd like to feedback, but then for more general feedback. But we only have about 4 minutes for that for each of the questions, so it will be quick. And then at the end, after 9 o'clock, I'm going to give each of the candidates 1 minute to give you a sum up of their position and their party's position. Okay, let's make a start. And I'm very sorry to say that the person who asked the first question, which is on the environment, can't be here, so I'm going to ask the question for them. But it gives me an opportunity to make a plug, because we do have on Monday the 24th an environmental hustings, which is taking part in the Maltings Arts Centre, and you're welcome to go there. I think it might be quite busy though, so I'm not sure whether you can book in advance. You need to find that out. Let me ask the first question. It is, if elected, what is the main thing you will try to do to mitigate the environmental crisis? And this has been submitted by Gabriel, and he's asked me to ask you. So, Simon, can we start with you?
The sun's come out, perfect timing, so I can't see you at all, so please don't run away. Or if you do, run away silently. What's the main thing that could help with this problem? Well, there's so many to choose from. It's hard to pick one, to be honest, and it's interesting how little talk there's been about climate, the nature emergency, the ecological crisis facing our planet during this election campaign so far. It astonishes me. I genuinely can't understand why the other parties are not talking about it. What's the main one? One I would pick is investment in renewable energy. We've already seen some of that in this country. Even just walking around St Albans, you can see the solar panels on people's houses, which we're paying for ourselves, those of us who can afford to do so. But actually, the government, in terms of strategy for energy going forward, is failing miserably. They have taken money away from investment in wind power, in solar power, and so on. And what's crucially lacking is some sense of strategy, so that the private sector, and it will be the private sector because they'll move quickly and they have the money, the private sector don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday, let alone what's going to happen on Monday, about this strategy, because there is no strategy. And so that's what we need. We need the government to set out what funding it can produce, what it requires in the future, and that's got to be a really clear message about reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, taking away the massive subsidies that we give as a country to the fossil fuel industry, and transferring those pretty much over to the renewable energy sector, and encouraging British companies who are so struggling to fulfill the need in this sector because of the weight against them of the way that the government is funding this situation. Allow British companies to step up and to do what they do best and innovate and build and produce and distribute wind power, solar power, there's tidal power, there's wave power, there's all these things. We're an island nation. We could very easily be 100% satisfied with renewable energy, and of course we need battery storage as well.
Organising such an amazing hustings, which I think is so incredibly important in a democracy, that people have an opportunity to talk to their candidates and hear from them. The environment is crucial to the future success of not just this generation, but for future generations. And that's why actually we do in our manifesto set out some really bold visions. I'm very glad that we've just had a mention of energy, probably the most crucial aspect of the ways in which we, both individually, but also as governments, can act to really attack the climate crisis. GB Energy, which is a core plank of the Labour manifesto, will enable us as a country to not only create green energy for ourselves, but to be a leader globally for renewable energies. It is not only good for the climate, but it's also incredibly important to our success as a nation, fundamentally, economically, creating over 650,000 jobs. It will provide us with security, and it provides every household with lower bills. But we won't stop there. We will also ensure that we double onshore wind. We've committed to tripling solar production, quadrupling offshore wind by 2030, investing in our nuclear capability, something that's been so neglected, and phasing out oil and gas. in a just way. We talk about the just transition for the Global South that is equally relevant here in the UK. In addition to that, we will invest in Warm Home Plan, where we'll invest £6.6 billion towards solar, battery power, lower carbon heating. We will do exactly what has just been described, to crowd in private investment, to supplement the ability of the government of the state to invest seed money to attract the private sector, because that is where innovation sits. And we will create a green finance capital here in the UK, something which I think will be essential.
Thank you, Sophia. John.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get real. Our contribution as a country to global warming, climate change, air pollution is under 1% per year. China is 27%. India is something like 17%. Both countries are building coal-fired power stations every week. Their contribution to the problem is making it worse. America is in a similar position, and so is Russia. We, at best, can have a minor influence. So what we propose is that we should be talking to those countries for them to stop being the problem and start to join us in being part of the solution. In the meantime, under the energy cap measures, all your energy bills will be going right back up again in October. If we're elected, and if we have MPs, and if we can influence public policy, we will be demanding reductions in energy prices, because you've all had quite enough to live with a cost of living crisis. We say, get real. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. The question, I believe, was around climate and ecological crisis. And there's a particular ecological crisis that I'm particularly concerned about locally, and that is the quality of our rivers. And I think that we have to be open and honest about the challenges facing us as a country about improving the ecology of our waterways and networks. We need to be clear that we are running on an outdated Victorian sewage system, which is going to need whole-scale work. And it's important to note that the government has been putting a lot of effort on water companies to make sure that up to £60 billion will be reinvested in our waterways to clean them up. And this is the biggest infrastructure investment we'll be seeing in recent years. But I think the other thing as well with rivers is that it's important we don't make it a party political issue. This has to be a cross-party initiative where we work together, because waterways matter to all of us, regardless of whatever political party we're involved in. And so we know it's impossible to overnight rebuild our sewage system. We simply don't have enough concrete, let alone 500 billion that it would cost. So I think we have to be realistic about that. And what is encouraging, really encouraging, is that the government has fast-tracked £180 million worth of investment to immediately reduce the amount of sewage going into our rivers. So we are working to reduce 8,000 discharges, which really, locally, is to me the most important ecological issue. Thank you.
I have some good news. There is no climate emergency. Fear-mongering studies and corporate media have created the illusion of a crisis. Carbon dioxide is a harmless, naturally occurring atmospheric gas. Human activity contributes little towards global warming. The adherence to fake green ideology is scientifically spurious and economically insane. We need to abandon the unnecessary commitment to net zero and ensure we produce enough energy to keep the lights on and power to our industry. We can achieve self-sufficiency in energy in several ways, including reopening mothballed coal power stations and stopping the lunatic practice of burning wood pellets from North and South American forests in stations like Drax. We can open new oil and gas fields in the North Sea and develop the shale gas industry for exclusive use within the UK. This will meet our natural gas needs for decades to come. We will commission 20 or more small nuclear power stations to provide a significant and cost-effective and reliable proportion of supply to the national grid. We will decommission wind turbines and solar arrays on prime agricultural land, which require massive subsidies that increase energy bills and kill wildlife. We will return our scarce farming land to producing crops. We will also support new energy production technologies that do not need government subsidies and can operate viably on the free market. To ensure sovereignty over our energy and environment policy, we must leave the Paris Climate Agreement, which implements UN Agenda 2030 and demands that our government adheres to the false ideology of climate alarmism. It is wrong to stay in such a far-reaching agreement whose disastrous effects have never been explained to the British people.
Thank you, David.
Good evening, everybody, and may I just start by saying a huge thank you to the whole Cathedral community for opening your doors to us once again and for giving us such a warm welcome this evening. We are facing a climate and ecological emergency. We have known that for years. The Liberal Democrats were the very first party to call for a windfall tax on the big oil and gas companies, and the reason for that was clear. We saw the raw injustice of these big companies raking in billions of pounds when ordinary folk couldn't afford to put their heating on, including here in St Albans. And the power of calling for that windfall tax was not just to reduce energy bills, not just to reduce energy usage, but to kickstart a home insulation scheme to bring up the standards of our homes and tackle the climate emergency. We Liberal Democrats have been fighting for stronger climate action in the last Parliament and many parliaments before. We have policies for an emergency home upgrade plan to increase solar panels and to finally lift the ban on onshore renewables, all things that I have been campaigning for since you elected me in 2019. But the question was very specifically about the environment. So there are three things that I would do within days of being re-elected if I was fortunate enough to be re-elected by you. The first is to tackle the next government on the sewage crisis, which has unfolded on the Conservatives' watch. The second would be to lobby to change the planning system, which does not deliver the homes we need, but does destroy our green spaces. And the third would be to appeal to next government to block the expansion of Luton Airport, because it is a disaster for the climate and it will destroy our local environment too.
Thank you, Daisy. Stuart.
Hi. Right, very briefly, from the top, 1% tax on private jets arriving in the UK. We would provide subsidies for anybody that wishes to put solar panels on their house, thermal heating. We would make it easier by reducing, by amending planning laws for wind farms to be put on land, unless it's high-grade agricultural land. Ultimately, the objective is for the UK to become energy self-sufficient, and we believe that the target here is nuclear power. So currently, I think it's 15% of the UK's energy is provided from nuclear. The target would be 40%, and the rest from renewables. We don't believe that renewables, wind, solar, can do it all on its own, but phase out fossil fuels, build up nuclear. The other point that one of the candidates made was about the emissions from the BRIC countries, if you like, India, China, whatever. It's quite straightforward. This leads on to something else about manufacturing. We don't believe that we should have so much manufacturing that's done abroad and imported into this country. It's done here, it's done in a green way. There's less traffic moving around the world, and we're making it ourselves. We're not polluting the atmosphere if we're making it in British factories. I don't have enough time to talk about the fact that we would nationalise the water companies pretty much immediately. They're all bankrupt anyway.
Well, some very, very different approaches to the environment there. Gabriel's not with us, so if any of you have a quick response to any of the candidates, then now's your chance. I'll take the first hand. Yes, there's a hand up here. Wait, we'll give you Gemma's going to come with a microphone.
It's very difficult to hear them. Could the sound system be improved? Am I the only one?
Clearly we have a bit of an issue with it. It sounds okay down here, but pronunciation, I think. We'll see if we can do anything. We've got some sound technicians. Yes, we do have one question right away at the back. And if you could keep these brief, please, because we do have to move on as quickly as we can.
You know the way sometimes you get policies and they get then costed out by auditors and stuff. Of the policies here for the environment, have any of you had yours audited by energy engineers to make sure we're not going to get blackouts from your policy?
The question, I think, was, do any of your policies guarantee that we're not going to get blackouts? I think. You're all nodding. They all have, none of them are going to give you blackouts. Yeah. Go on, Daisy, quick.
So last year, the Liberal Democrats did call on the government to introduce a rule which would require every political party to put their manifesto forward to be audited by the OBR, but sadly it wasn't supported.
The next question is on defence, and Andrew is going to ask the question.
Good evening. On the 80th anniversary of D-Day, what practical steps will your parties take to secure peace in Europe for the next generation? Thank you.
Sophia, would you start this time?
I think it's safe to say that all of us would agree that we live in probably the most volatile and fragile state that any of us, of my generation at least, can remember. I started my career at the UN, working in Kofi Annan's team on what was then the Counterband Test Ban Treaty. In an era where actually we felt that the world was coming together, where the Cold War was ending, where we were able to build international consensus, that's really sadly over. Quite abruptly, Putin's invasion of Ukraine has shown us that alone. And now more than ever, we have an absolute need to build our partnerships to be stronger. And that's why as Labour we are committed to NATO, we are committed to ensuring that we fulfil our obligations by NATO, that we also strike a new UK-EU pact on security to ensure that we are able to share intelligence in real time better. The fragility that we see globally comes home all too often, far too quickly. And that's why actually counter-terrorism measures domestically also will play a big part in the way in which we keep ourselves safe within these borders, but importantly, how we build relationships across international communities, working with multinational organizations. And partly that comes from having a government that's worth its word, one that doesn't undermine its own institutions of the rule of law, doesn't sign treaties and then decide doesn't quite like them. Because our partners rely upon partnerships that are built on trust. And that's what we're offering. We're offering both competence and trust domestically, but also the ability to reach across borders and work closely with our allies to ensure that we have not only a safer environment in which we live now, but to build towards a sustainable peace, whether that be in the Middle East, whether it be on our borders here in the UK, in Europe, or whether it be anything that might come next.
We need to go from a situation in which the British Army is the same size as it was at the time of the Battle of Waterloo. That's how much our armed services have sunk. So we are advocating that we will ensure our servicemen and women have the resources they need to defend our nation and that they're respected and supported after they leave service. We will increase defence spending to 2.5% of national GDP by year 3 and then 3% within 6 years. We'll introduce an urgent pay review so that it's an attractive occupation to defend our country. We'll provide them with decent accommodation, which they do not get at present. We will introduce a new Armed Forces Justice Bill so that they will be protected after they leave the service. We will set up a new dedicated ministerial department for veterans so that after they take their well-earned retirement, we will help them to adjust and assimilate properly into civilian life, rather than being abandoned and left homeless on the streets of St Albans. I'm sure you've seen some of those poor individuals. Thereafter, we would recruit 30,000 new service personnel for the Army. We will regenerate Britain's defence manufacturing and technology sector, which is simply not fit for purpose. That's been proven by the war in Ukraine, where the European countries cannot supply them with their needs. In a greater conflict, we would need even more of that. We will reform defence procurement. I know you've heard this for decades, but we mean it. And finally, to provide education for military personnel, both within service and after service, sending them to universities and further education colleges to prepare them for civilian life again. Give them a decent deal at the end of their service. I hope you will support that. Thank you.
It's that one that's not working. I'm going to go to the back and listen, but if you could use that one.
This is some of the most uncertain times we are living in. And I work for a young leaders charity which works with 17,000 of the best and brightest young leaders all over the world, every single country in the world. And there is a fear about the direction that this planet is heading. But the way we defend ourselves, the way we create peace in Europe, is from a position of strength, which is why the Conservative Party is committed to making to the 2.5% increase in defence spending as a proportion of GDP. And I think it's important that we understand why that is such a significant figure, because it will make us the most powerful nation military-wise in Europe. It will make us the second most powerful military in NATO. To keep Europe safe, we need to show strength. We need to maintain our commitment to Trident, which the Conservative Party has an unwavering commitment to. And we need to support our veterans. It's very interesting that the question was framed in the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We must support our veterans, which is why we're committed to maintaining a veterans minister. We're committed to investing more money into veteran services as well, including things like the free rail card or reducing the rail card for veterans. So yes, strength is the key to this, and the only way we'll do that is by investing that 2.5% of GDP in our armed forces, and the only realistic way to get that is to elect a Conservative government.
The first duty of the armed forces is defence of the realm. The managed decline of the British Armed Forces must stop, and it must be restored to at least the levels we had at the turn of the century. We should become a strong military power that can act positively where necessary and when in our national interest. That includes deployment around our sea borders to prevent illegal immigration and to ensure that our airspace, 200-mile exclusive economic zone and underwater infrastructure is secure. There must be no control of our armed forces by anyone apart from the UK government. We must pull out of all programmes and schemes which even hint at joint control or management of our military together with the European Union. And go specifically to the question, the UK should disentangle from foreign conflicts which have nothing to do with our national interests and only benefit the warmongers of the military-industrial complex. The involvement of our armed forces in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Ukraine was neither for the defence of the realm or the protection of the British people. Instead, the damage to the stability of these nations has created migration crises that are detrimental to social cohesion and public safety at home. We hold to the principle of non-engagement in third-party conflicts and de-escalation of tensions at the earliest possible juncture to avoid unnecessary death, suffering, homelessness, and migration. We would send no more weapons to Ukraine or Israel. We call for peace, not war with Russia, and for a ceasefire in Gaza.
One of the reasons I'm a Liberal is because I'm an internationalist. And I believe that many people in St Albans have a very internationalist outlook. Since I was elected in 2019, I have received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails about war in Europe, war in the Middle East, and war in all sorts of other places around the world. I think there are three areas where we should be taking stronger action: defence, diplomacy, and democracy. So on our defence, we absolutely have to reverse the cuts to our troops, the cuts of 10,000 troops. We have to reverse that as soon as possible. Liberal Democrats are committed to year-on-year increases in spending on defence, and we have the ambition of reaching 2.5% of GDP by the end of the next Parliament. But diplomacy matters too. And this is the area where I have felt really disappointed in this government, because there is so much more that they could have been doing. So when it comes to Ukraine, the government should have been clearing up the dirty Russian money in London and across this country. And the UK government should have convened an EU-wide summit to gather all of those frozen, the frozen resources from that Russian money, and to work out how we could use that to help the defence of Ukraine. And the third part is on democracy. It is really hard to overestimate the damage that has been done to our international reputation by Conservative ministers who have said that they are happy to break international law in a limited way. I no longer want to see a government that is happy to be a pariah. We have to stand up for our democracy and our values, both here and abroad.
Stuart.
Commitment to 2.5% of GDP for the defence budget. Veteran support in terms of mental health support. Priority when allocating the 100,000 new social houses that we intend to build each year. They would go to military families first, ex-military families. We also pursue a policy of non-intervention in foreign conflicts that are of none of our concern unless there is a direct threat to the security of the United Kingdom, Iraq, Afghanistan. It is not our job to go around the world trying to get people to adopt Western democracy when they're really not interested in it. And what has it actually achieved in those countries? Really? Nothing at all. In terms of the defence budget overall, you need a better strategy here. 2 enormous, expensive aircraft carriers, one of which is permanently dry docked because it's too expensive to put both of them out to sea at the same time, and neither of them have got planes on. What's all that about? Really? I mean, you know, if you're going to invest large amounts of money, think cyber, because we are already at war. Last week, this country was attacked. All the operations that were cancelled in hospitals in London foreign cyber attacks. Let's be honest, we know exactly who was behind that. And that has to be fought every single week, not occasionally when somebody draws their tanks up the other side of the channel. We are constantly under attack from on that level. And so a large amount needs to be allocated there as well. Thank you.
What concerns me a little bit about some of the things that you've just heard is it all seems to be talk about building strength, preparing for conflict and aggression. And I think important as it is to talk about the defence of the country, we also need to think about what is the opposite of war. The opposite of war is peace. And we need to be building for peace as much as we are preparing for some future conflict and trying to defend this country. The European Union was originally a defence organisation. That's why it came together and has largely been very successful compared to the previous decades in that. So one thing that I think we should be doing is rejoining the EU as soon as it's practically possible. Greens would support NATO as an important way of uniting countries together in common defence, but it needs to be reformed. It needs to be reformed so that it's looking at the whole situation more widely across foreign policy, international relations, trade, with the lens of how do we build peace between countries rather than simply preparing for some kind of war. We need to increase our foreign aid budget because we need to reduce inequity across the world, which is getting wider and wider, and inequity leads to war. Foreign aid is an important part of that. So unlike some of the parties in this election, Greens would increase foreign aid, not decrease it. And finally, there is a climate aspect to this whole situation. Climate causes water problems, food problems, it causes migration, and all these things can lead to conflict. So as well as talking about literally our defense and weapons and all these kinds of ideas, we need to be thinking about addressing the climate emergency throughout the world, as that will also help to build peace.
You've heard the candidates. Do you feel that their policies are going to ensure peace in Europe? Or peace generally?
Thank you very much to you all for your answers. The reason why I asked the question is that when I hear people talking about this as being a pre-war period, as if there's some sort of inevitability about it, it terrifies me. And the answers, I must say, the question was about peace, and the answers which I'm most encouraged by are those which talk about us using our diplomatic muscle as well as our military muscle to secure our part in keeping peace in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Great question. Now, we move on to housing now, and could I ask Stella if she could ask her question?
Yes. First of all, can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the candidates for joining us this evening. Your time is most appreciated. My question, it is well known that there is a severe shortage of housing across the country, but there has been significant local resistance over the past few years to development on the Greenbelt land around St Albans. How do you think the right balance should be struck between providing the housing we need and protecting our green belt around St Albans? I put that question to all candidates.
That's great. Now, John, I think you're first up this time.
Actually, I'm glad you've asked that question. That's exactly the question I would like to answer. The 15,000 properties and associated infrastructure to be built on St Albans Greenbelt land, the proposals of your Liberal Democrat-controlled council are crazy. They're crazy because you've got to have to think about all the roads and all the associated infrastructure that would have to go with that. When I went to a meeting of the Harpenden Society, I think it's called, and I asked one of the Liberal Democrat councillors there, what notice have you taken of the Environment Agency's serious concern about flood risk and flood risk analysis being inadequate, it was brushed aside. He didn't care about the flood risk that would be associated with that development. Well, I say to you, and as I said to the people then, this will not only affect the new properties and the existing or the new residents in those areas, it will affect you in your existing homes and communities, and your properties are going to be affected by flood risk in the future. And these proposals are absolutely insane. Now, we, Reform UK, are describing this election as the immigration election. You'll know that. One of the reasons we call it the immigration election is that the tsunami wave of immigration being allowed into this country is clearly putting unbearable pressure on all sorts of areas, including housing. And this is why even parties like the Liberal Democrats, and I read Daisy Cooper's speech that she gave in the House of Commons on one occasion, in which she outbid every other party by declaring a target of 380,000 new properties to be built under a Liberal Democrat government each year. I leave it to you to decide.
Thank you, John. James.
Right, thank you. I think the key word in that question was need. The number of houses we actually need in St Albans is very different to the amount of housing demand in St Albans. And for too long, those numbers have been just completely conflated, and which is why we're seeing proposals for thousands of houses on Greenbelt land. And look, I was someone who was born in Coney Heath. I grew up there before my parents moved to Jersey Farm. I've lived on and next to the Greenbelt my entire life in St Albans, and I will die in a ditch to stop it being concreted over. So as MP, I will do these 4 things. We need to have this review into housing need and housing demand, and I will oppose any top-down government national building targets which do not look at this demand-need divide. I support wholeheartedly the government's plan to build on brownfield round the 20 largest cities in the country, and spoiler alert, St Albans is not one of them. And I will publicly fight and campaign against every single Greenbelt application in St Albans. And in a previous life, I was a councillor on Westminster City Council, and I did a lot of work there as a chair of planning. And so I know the planning processes, policies inside out. So me, you'll have an MP who is a good planning advocate. And finally, I will lobby in Parliament, and if necessary, put forward a private member's bill to update the Metropolitan Town and Country Planning Act so it reinforces this green ring of steel around London to stop St Albans becoming just another suburb of the capital. Thank you.
Thank you, James. David.
The Heritage Party is committed to preserving what is left of the natural beauty of our countryside and our towns and villages. Firstly, by a drastic reduction in immigration to avoid rampant development. Our green belts and countryside should not be concreted over to build housing for artificially inflated population growth. Furthermore, once our beautiful towns and cities, across the country have been brutalized by depressingly ugly modernist architecture. We will require all new homes and commercial buildings to be constructed in keeping with the traditional and historic character of the area. Every young British family should be able to buy their own home. The housing market must work for home buyers rather than big property developers who benefit from the unrelenting influx of immigration. Also, schemes which interfere with the housing market and the ability of councils to provide council homes to local people who need them should be abolished, along with all housing targets for local councils.
Thank you for the question, Stella. It's a really, really important one. At the moment, we have a top-down planning system that gives us the worst of both worlds. It doesn't deliver the homes that we desperately need in St Albans, the 3- and 4-bed homes that we need to tackle overcrowding, but it does destroy the green belt, and that is a massive problem. So the entire planning system at the moment puts all the power in the hands of the big developers. They can buy up brownfield sites and they never have to build on it. They can land bank it for years and years and years, seeing the value rise without ever having to build a home. People can buy up 10, 20 flats in St Albans, as they do, and rent them out as Airbnbs. It might be good for tourism, but no young person, no young families can even rent those properties, let alone buy them. There's a huge amount that needs to be done in terms of giving local authorities the powers to regulate properties in their local area as well. So what Liberal Democrats would do is we would introduce a community-led planning system, putting all the power in the hands of local communities to determine the houses that they need, to work out where they put them and what infrastructure is needed. And when you look at Liberal Democrat-run councils in places like Portsmouth and in Chelmsford and in Kingston, these are councils that are building the homes that they need in those communities with the blessing and support of those communities, because they tackle housing need, but they don't destroy our beautiful green spaces. That is fundamentally what we need to do. But what I'm sick and tired of is a government that continues to promise that it's going to protect our green belt, and then every single opportunity it has to do it, it throws it away.
Stuart.
Okay, so to be clear, when I mentioned in the previous question our 100,000 house per year pledge, that was 100,000 social houses. Let's call them council houses, like the one I used to live in, all right? So that's 2, 3 bedroom houses for young families, veterans, priority people like that. They are essential. They need to be built. We don't have enough of them. People need to live somewhere. And the priority would be to build those, and it might be necessary to build some of them on low-value agricultural land, if we can't find enough brownfield sites. Private developers would never be allowed to build in the green belt, ever. The Social Democratic Party is not a friend of private property developers. 50% tax on land banking is in our manifesto. Where you build should be determined by consultation with the local community, and also look at the big picture, the UK. Let's not build in St Albans 4 or 5 bedroom houses because it's convenient for London. They're probably worth about 900 grand each, 50% profit. I'm not aware of a national shortage of 5 bedroom houses with a double garage. I'm really not. So that's not what we need. So local consultation with residents, build it in the right part of the country as well. It doesn't all have to be in the southeast. There's too much concentrated in this part of the country anyway. All the regeneration plans that the Tories came up with.
Simon.
Houses in St Albans are the most expensive outside of London in the whole country compared to income. They're 18 times more expensive than income. You don't fix that problem by building on the greenbelt. So what we need is a housing strategy and a housing plan locally that fixes the problem. Greens would build 150,000 social homes, remember those, a year. That's part of our plan and that's costed in our manifesto. You don't just build on greenbelt because it's there and never mind the NIMBYs, you don't want it to be there. There's a reason that it's being protected. It's not just about keeping us distant from London, important as that is. It's also about the precious nature of that area, and it doesn't need to be beautiful, it just needs to be open so that it can provide all the ecosystem services, for those nerds amongst you, that it provides us for free. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, filthy as it is at the moment, the food that we eat. We need green and open places in between our settlements, otherwise we lose all of that and we will certainly notice the consequences. Greenbelt land is really precious. The land banking problem is actually absolutely huge, as mentioned. We would introduce a land value tax so that you are penalised if you have land that you are not building on, rather than the way that this is taxed at the moment, which isn't working at all. There's also 1 million empty homes in the UK, empty. There's also a massive under-occupation problem where you have a small number of people living in a large house, and that's partly again to do with the way the taxes work. You know, stamp duty makes it very difficult and expensive to move houses, so we would look at changing the tax system to make it much easier for people to downsize if they choose to do so.
Thank you, Simon.
Everyone deserves a home. Why? Because it gives you security, a place of belonging. Now imagine for a moment you don't have that. Imagine for a moment you don't have any security about the roof over your head, that you're couch surfing, or you're living in rented property that doesn't meet the standard that you require for a safe and secure family. That's why Labour's manifesto embeds in it a clear commitment to build 1.5 million houses over the course of the Parliament, the biggest housing building programme for affordable and social housing. But that doesn't have to come at the cost of the environment either. We've made this really clear. We don't want to shove them up quick and fast, cheap, so that people suffer the consequences of the sorts of things that happened at Grenfell, or building entire communities without any infrastructure to support. Rather, what we're planning with those 1.5 million houses, that they are high quality, the presumption of high quality, and that they're sustainable, and that they come with them the infrastructure that's required. We have a golden rule that any development needs to benefit the community as well as nature. And it is possible to find those spaces, whether it be brownfield, which we've said will always come first, or the grey belt, which we describe as being the low quality land that isn't quite classed as brownfield. But maybe it's not also just around places like St Albans. Maybe it's time for us to think about new towns, and that's why in our manifesto we commit to the building of a number of new towns, which will have within them not only infrastructure, but also the energy requirements, the local power, in addition to educational needs and healthcare needs. And local voice sits at the heart of that. We will ensure that communities have a voice in the planning process, and a planning process that actually is devolved, and we will require all to have a local plan.
Thanks, Sophia. Stella, are you convinced? We've got a microphone.
Thank you so much for your answers. Each of you, interesting aspect on how you'd address this. My concern still remains development of the green belt. I heard a lot about brown belt development. There's not so much in St Albans. Simon, you said about 150,000 homes. Is that St Albans? Will that avoid the green belt? I appreciate housing is a priority. We want young people housed in homes, affordable homes, as you said about sort of elderly people and that, but everyone looked after, quality of life to be good. However, I've heard lots of numbers, and I don't know where these numbers are going to be put in St Albans, and at this moment in time, it remains my concern. To whoever is successful, I'd love a conversation about this more with you in detail. Thank you very much.
Stella, thank you for the question. We're going to move on to the NHS now, and can I ask Paddy, if he's there, if he could ask his question.
Hello. Hello. Good evening, everyone. When I hit crisis point in terms of mental health, I had to seek private healthcare because it was impossible to speak to somebody at the NHS, and I'm really nervous and scared that we're heading towards a two-tier healthcare system. So I'd like to know what each of you would do if elected to ensure that every young person can get free and high quality mental health care that they need.
James, can we start with you?
Thank you for that question. We are in the grips of a mental health crisis amongst young people, not just in this country, but around the world. As I said earlier, I work for the young people's charity, One Young World, and we held our summit last year, and one of the big issues was mental health. And it is an epidemic which all countries are grappling with at the moment, which is why the Conservatives have committed to spending over 700 million on improving mental health resources in the NHS. But the other thing as well is we've got to think of realistically is A&E waiting times, because for when people are in mental health crises, often A&E is the place where they end up. And I get it, A&E waiting lists are still far too high. I was in A&E with my father only just a couple of weeks ago. They are moving in the right direction. We've seen a reduction in 200,000 over the last 6 months, which, as I said, is an improvement, but we need to do more. And the way we reduce the numbers in A&E is by reducing the number of people who need to be there in the first place. And that means opening up more Pharmacies First options to free up 20 million more GP appointments. We're pledged to build 100 more GP surgeries. We're pledged to open 50 more diagnostic care clinics all across the country. And that's £1 billion worth more investment. And just while we're talking around the wider subject of health, I would also say is that we need the better resources locally in St Albans. I've said it once, I've said it again, and I'll keep banging on about this as MP. It is ridiculous that people in this city have to go to Watford or to Hemel or to Barnet for A&E services. As MP, I will lobby, thank you. I will lobby for us to expand our integrated urgent care hub in St Albans for longer hours, make it 24 hours if necessary, and have capacity for walk-in appointments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, James. David.
So thanks for the question, and your concerns are very valid and relate not only to mental health, but to our healthcare system as a whole. From the Heritage Party perspective, we believe the NHS needs to be rebuilt from its roots with patients in mind, not bureaucrats or the profits of pharmaceutical companies. We should be able to see a GP face-to-face with no waiting time, and the NHS should fund treatment in the private sector where necessary to reduce waiting lists for surgery or treatments. We should train practitioners without having to rely on a constant stream of migrant workers. There should be no caps on the number of university places for British citizens to train to be doctors, dentists, therapists, etc., and also to train on the job as nurses and midwives. The NHS should only be available for UK citizens. Foreign nationals in the UK should be required to take out private medical insurance. Medical autonomy and informed consent must be upheld and never again breached as they were in the COVID era. There must never be any coercion, threat, penalty or punishment for choosing not to take a particular medicine or vaccination. There must never be a repeat of the general rollout of unsafe products like thalidomide or experimental mRNA injections, which have contributed to a surge in excess mortality and the physical impairment of multitudes of people who were deceived into taking them. Preventative medicine and the use of natural products should be at the heart of our healthcare system, whereby citizens are empowered to live healthy and wholesome lifestyles and avoid chronic conditions that make them dependent on drugs. Mental health should be cared for by empowering citizens to experience varied, healthy lifestyles and to avoid the negative messaging of media corporations.
Thank you, David. Daisy.
First of all, thank you very much for raising the question. mental health is probably the number 1 or 2 issue that comes up when I go into schools in St Albans, and young people always talk about mental health and the climate emergency. Those are the 2 top issues that come up time and time again. We now know that about 50% of mental health conditions start before the age of 14. And that is why prevention is so important. That is why mental health support is so important before the age of 14. It's why Liberal Democrats want there to be a mental health hub in every single community around the country. We also want there to be a mental health practitioner in every single primary and secondary school. And we want people to have access to mental health checks throughout their lives and make it just as normal to have a mental health checkup with your GP as it is to have a physical health checkup with your GP as well. Now, we're incredibly lucky here in St Albans that we've got some fantastic mental health charities. We've got Youth Talk, we've got the Ollie Foundation, and we've got Time to Talk. And they all do a fantastic job. But for those young people who are in crisis, the CAMS service, the Children's and Adolescent Mental Health Service, is in complete crisis. And having been your MP for 4.5 years, I've received those emails at 2 o'clock in the morning when somebody has reached crisis point and they're stuck in a corridor in A&E in Watford General and they can't get the help they need. But let me just say this about A&E. If anybody of any age is having a mental health crisis and they end up in A&E, the mental health service has failed them, because you shouldn't have to end up in A&E. We have got to stop thinking about hospitals and A&E. We have to have community care. People need to be able to access the care they need on their high street with GPs and dentists and mental health experts and social care on their street, in their community. That is how we fix our health service.
Totally agree about the importance of having mental health counsellors in every school. Also, the point about CAMS. I heard somewhere that there's something like a 6-month waiting list to get an appointment. Probably true, I don't know. The way I look at mental health, particularly for young people, is that it's prevention, okay? Because unless you get somebody to the necessary counsellor in good time, the outcome is going to be a lot worse. So 6 months, it's no good whatsoever. I think also the pressures that we all face probably weigh heavier on young people than they do on those of us that are older. Okay? When we were growing up, we didn't have social media, which, to be honest, if I could have a magic wand, I would make it disappear in a flash, because so much in social media is not good at all. For that reason, one of our policies is to make 16 the minimum age at which you can access social media completely. Also, the way in which some of life's challenges are actually taught at school needs to be thought of as well. So it's not piling pressure on people, so they can actually relax without worrying about things like the climate emergency. We all know it's there, but all talking about it in the wrong way to school kids does is induce anxiety and despair. It needs to be addressed in a positive way. What can you do about it? Not the Greta Thunberg, we're all doomed scenario. Thank you.
Simon.
It's pretty galling to hear the Conservatives talk about all their plans for rescuing the NHS. After 14 years, they've been deliberately underfunding it to a tune of tens of billions of pounds. They have completely uncosted plans for so-called improvements that they haven't been doing for the last 14 years. Labour have said, oh, we're going to improve it, but we're also going to stick to the Tories' fiscal rules, so how's that going to work? There's a massive black hole. We're the only party really that is being honest about the fact that we are going to have to fix that underfunding by, surprise, surprise, funding. And that is going to be a lot of money, but we're also clear about where that's going to come from. You can read it in the manifesto. We think that the NHS will initially need £8 billion a year, rising to £28 billion in 2030, eye-watering amounts of money I agree. Mental health needs to be put on an equal footing with physical health for some of the reasons that we've already heard. Our plan for the NHS includes ensuring access to evidence-based mental health therapies within 28 days, providing trained counsellors in schools. Remember school nurses? Bringing back some on-site NHS help in schools, and investing in primary care to make sure that mental health services are more accessible across our communities. And absolutely, in answer to the question, no creeping privatisation.
Labour is the party of the NHS. We created it. We've inherited an absolute mess as a nation after 14 years of Tory rule. It's on its knees. There's absolutely no element of the NHS that you touch where the staff are not at their end of their tether, where patients are not waiting on trolleys, where diagnoses take too long and people's lives are ruined and at worst lost. And mental health, the crisis that we see not only in primary care but also in community, is a prime example of the state in which we find the NHS. And that's why it's a priority. We fixed it once before when we inherited a mess from the Tories in '97, and we'll fix it again. But it's not a small mess to pick up. This will take time. Well, we have made some commitments in our manifesto, and I just want to take a moment to set those out. We will cut those waiting times, starting with 40,000 appointments every week. We'll double the number of cancer scans. We'll put in place a dentistry rescue plan with 700,000 appointments, specifically on mental health, 8,500 mental health staff. You have to have trained mental health care workers in the system. Returning to community as being the basis of a healthcare system where people can come to initial help and support. We will trial the neighbourhood healthcare centres, but importantly, invest back into our local communities and invest in our GP services by training more GPs and ensuring that people have access to a regular GP, the same person, so you can talk to them regularly about an ongoing condition, whether it be mental health or anything else.
Thank you, Sophia. John.
Your question is quite complex. It's complex to answer. I'm sure you know that, yeah. I just want to give you a little background on myself. When I was a councillor, a Labour councillor in Watford between 1995 and 1999, I led a campaign against the West Herts Health Authority wishing to close the Watford, Hamel and St Albans hospitals. They wanted to replace them with one mega hospital in a place called the Golden Triangle, which even to this day, I don't quite know where it was. I think it was between the junctions of the M1 and the M25. I then became a member of, some of the older people might remember these, a member of the South West Herts Community Health Council. Remember those? We had a statutory right of objection to object to the Strategic Health Authority's plans. I ended up going to number 70 Whitehall with the team and arguing against the Health Authority and their proposals to the Minister of State for Health. And basically, we won the argument. That's why you've still got a St Albans hospital, we've still got a Hamel hospital, and we've still got one in Watford. However, there were plans in place in 2010, the money was ready to go to upgrade all three. The incoming Labour and Liberal, the incoming Conservative and Liberal Democrat coalition government put a stop to it. And it's still not happened ever since. The one thing I will say to you is we have plans for people who are needing medical care to help them get into work afterwards, you know. And we've got schemes for doctors and nurses who've got student loan debt to have it paid off completely after 10 years of service in the NHS. So any of the young students here thinking about taking up a medical career, you ought to vote for us. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Paddy, I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but does anyone else have any immediate feedback for the candidates on the NHS? There's a hand up there, please.
Thank you. I'd like to ask this question to James in particular, if I may. 4 years ago, the Conservative Party promised 40 new hospitals by 2030. Given that you are asking us to place our trust in Conservative promises here and now, how's that going?
James, 1 minute to answer.
I'll be very brief. Since 2019, we've had the world's biggest global pandemic to date as well, which has taken up quite a lot of NHS time and resource. But I think what we are talking about really now is personnel, and we are committed to a £2.4 billion investment to increase the number of nurses in our hospitals to by 92,000 and then get another 28,000 new doctors in our service too.
Paddy, do you have any comments?
Thank you very much for answering my question. Just on the point of privatisation, I just wanted to check if any of the candidates thought that was a way to fix the NHS rather than more funding.
I think the question was about prioritisation, but I think some of you have commented on that in the sequence. Does anyone have a specific response? Yes, please, Sophia.
There's a really fundamental principle to the NHS, and one that we should absolutely protect at all costs, which is by no means should access to healthcare be dependent upon whether or not you can afford it. We put an end to that debate when we established the NHS. The fact that in modernity we're having the debate now is a shame.
Thank you. Let us move on to education, and can I ask Andy if he would like to ask his question?
Yes, good evening. For this country to thrive, it's really important that all children are able to attend great schools and be taught by great teachers. But it seems both are now in short supply. What would you do to fix this, and where does education sit amongst your priorities?
Now, will you allow me to abuse my chairman's position and ask you to include further education and higher education when you answer the question? I think, is it Daffyd this time?
So thanks for the question. Education needs a complete overhaul to repair the damage done by cultural Marxists who've infiltrated our institutions at every level. Our aim is to return to an era characterized by high unemployment, broad skill sets, and British manufacturing. We as a nation should be self-sufficient in skills. Our youngsters trained to do jobs so that they can earn a good living, and there's no longer a need to depend on unsustainable flows of cheap labour from abroad. Education should foster excellence, making students self-reliant and able to thrive in professional and technical careers. We would re-implement a tripartite system at secondary level, with grammar schools for the academically inclined, technical schools for those with an aptitude for practical skills, and general schools to ensure that all have the capacity to succeed in the world of work if they decide to leave at 16. There should be parity of esteem between academic, technical, and vocational training. Universities should be for the 20% or so of people who will benefit from rigorous academic courses. We would pay off the student loans of British students who've graduated in STEM subjects as long as they go on to work in their field in the UK. We will invest in apprenticeships and bring back polytechnics to teach technical skills to succeed in the practical trades. Poor quality courses of little use to employers should be defunded, and failing universities should not be saved. Institutions that force-feed corrosive ideologies and divisive identity politics should not receive government subsidies or grants.
I'm so passionate about education because it's education that gives every single child the best start in life. But because our economy is changing, we need to think about education from cradle to grave. So first of all, we have a huge problem in our schools at the moment, and exacerbated by the pandemic, which is the gap between attainment between children, between the haves and have-nots, has got a lot bigger. So Liberal Democrats would increase funding per head for children in schools. We would introduce free school meals for all children living in poverty. That's for every family on universal credit, so that every child living in poverty gets at least one hot meal a day to help them concentrate and learn. We would introduce an extended tutoring programme to help those children that have fallen behind, to help them catch up. Some of you may know that I have been campaigning relentlessly about our SEND system. Hertfordshire got the worst rating possible for its special educational needs system, and the funding from government is appalling. We have got one of the worst funding rates of any county in the whole of the country for special educational needs, and under the government's current funding system, it will take us 15 years to catch up with the funding that neighbouring Buckinghamshire has, and they too are in the bottom 40 poorly funded counties. In terms of higher and further education, well, we really need to expand our colleges and their role. We would look at potentially scrapping VAT on some colleges. When it comes to universities, we would reinstate the maintenance grants that Liberal Democrats put in place, which the Conservatives removed, so people from the poorest backgrounds have a shot at going to university. And we put in place a lifelong skills account, so that when people need to reskill and upskill at various points during their life, which they will need to do with the rapid advancement of AI, they have the opportunity to do that, so they always have a chance of getting a decent job.
Yeah, I'm glad that cradle to grave was mentioned, because that's a good way to start. Let's take nursery fees. 50% of those would be tax deductible. Also, this goes with our working for families theme. We would ask that employers look more favourably on families when work-life balance changes come through, and we would actually mandate most people should be offered a hybrid working contract of working from home 3 days a week. So this helps with early years. When you go on to primary school, we would actually have free school meals for all primary school children, all of them, during term time, as well as after school and breakfast clubs as well in all schools. Grammar schools, we need grammar schools, so we would build more grammar schools. Then we move on to further education. So the tuition fees that somebody introduced, I don't know, about 14 years ago, can't remember who that was, they would be instantly reduced to £7,000, down from 9 at least. But in many cases, they wouldn't be any tuition fees at all if for certain subjects. Student loans, the interest rate capped, and basically employers would be reimbursed for employing apprentices. We'd also encourage hybrid schemes for degrees where you've got work placements as well. Yet again, encouraging employers to employ apprentices and reimbursing them on a sliding scale between 25 and 75% of the wage of the person. Foreign students, we would cut the number of foreign students by half.
Simon.
After 14 years of Conservative government, there's so much wrong with our education system, it's quite hard to know where to start, isn't it? It's, again, been deliberately underfunded, and the education system now operates like a production line instead of a place that's educating our children. So there's so many things that we can fix. First of all, we'll abolish Ofsted, which makes schools such a miserable place to work in. We'll abolish university tuition fees. We've been promising that for years, and we have a plan for funding it. We would end this crazy high-stakes testing regime that runs increasingly through more and more years and makes teachers' lives a misery and students' lives a misery and parents' lives a misery. We would restore arts in the curriculum, which has been outrageously cut and reduced in value by this government right through from primary right through to university. And we would put £5 billion into SEND, Special Educational Needs Provision, because that is a system, as Daisy said, is absolutely falling apart in the most disgraceful way. Thank you.
Breaking down barriers to opportunity sits as one of the five core missions that we've set out in our manifesto. And education plays such a crucial role in that. It played a crucial role in my ability to move from where I grew up in Stoke to a very poor family to be able to be here today standing as a parliamentary candidate, which for the majority of people in Stoke at the time would have been a pipe dream, and it was education that did it for me. Education is on its knees, as I've described the NHS. Literally, our schools are falling down. Teachers are leaving in droves. I'm a governor of my local primary state school, and I see day to day the pressures that we're facing. The ability, or the need in actual fact, to steal from Peter in order to feed Paul. We don't feel like we're doing the best by our children, and we should. We live in the United Kingdom 2024. Why are teaching standards, why are our children suffering in schools with such poor outcomes to look forward to in a way that shouldn't be the case? It should be progressive compared to where I grew up. So in our manifesto, we've committed to make education a core plank. We will be bringing on board 6,500 teachers over the course of the Parliament, 3,000 nursery places based within schools, just as we did in the new Labour government in 1997 with literacy. We will focus down on numeracy. We'll drive up standards, looking at also reforming Ofsted. We will deliver breakfast clubs. 1 in 8 young people between the ages of 18 and 21 are not in work, not looking for work, not an apprenticeship, and not training. Our guarantee will be to fix that. And for further education, we will look to reform the further education colleges to meet the skills that are identified through the industrial strategy, so we tie up the entire system. The industrial strategy that identifies the needs, with universities and further education colleges being able to provide those very skills.
Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah, I've got a leaflet here. If any of you would like to have a look at it at the end, please come and see me. It tells you something about what our overall policies are and my personal message to the voters or the electors of St Albans. I completed ordinary national, higher national certificates in business studies in the 1960s, and I also gained the diploma of the Institute of Purchasing Supply. I was an industrial purchasing manager. After a number of years working around the world in different countries, I came back and decided to upskill. I started off looking at computer studies, but decided it wasn't for me. So what my real interest was politics. So I took a BA honours degree in government and politics. I then got a job as a college lecturer in politics and business studies. I then continued with my studies and got an MA in government and politics. And I finally got a certificate in education in post-compulsory education. So I can teach in either further or higher education. So yes, I do have slight interest in education. I also continued that interest when I became the chair of the governing body of a primary school in central Watford. I did that for about 4 years, and we got the Ofsted grades raised, quite significantly. So I do have good experience of it. I would want to go round and see the various schools. I just want to remind you all of one thing. The word education is based on the Latin word educare, and it means to draw out the potential of the individual. And that is our role as teachers, is to facilitate that process. Thank you.
Please.
I know the importance of what a great local education can do, and that's because I went to 2 fabulous St Albans schools. First at Wheatfields, when my mum was a teaching assistant, and then at Sandringham. And it's the opportunities that those schools gave me which made it possible for me to be the first in my family to go to university. And the reason why we have that is because we have driven up standards as a government in education. And I have to disagree with colleagues. Standards are so important. And to be fair to the Liberal Democrats, when they were in coalition government with us, 2010, 2015, it was Michael Gove and David Laws who really pushed that commitment for standards. And we inherited a system where we were 27th, 25th, 26th in the world for reading, maths and science. And now, after 14 years, they are some of the best in the world. This is a huge achievement. We've also increased the number of apprenticeships we have. And I disagree with this idea that we have to go back to the arcane days of polytechnics or whatever. I mean, technology has moved on. We need to be upskilling people to deal with the technology, with AI, and with some of the developments we have around the world today. We also need to recognize the role of parents as the primary educators as well. So it's essential that we allow parents to see what is being taught at schools too. But I promised my mum I wouldn't do this, but I am going to get a little political here. The big threat we face in St Albans in education is Labour's destructive private school tax, it's a vindictive class war policy which will do nothing other than put our precious school places at our state schools at threat. So the only way to protect school places in St Albans is to vote Conservative on the 4th of July.
Andy, where is Andy? Andy, would you like to comment on any of the position statements you've heard from the candidates?
Well, there's some interesting points there, some frankly crackpot ideas as well. But education is so important, and I do feel that there's a huge, in St Albans we're lucky, we have some great schools, some really good teachers, but that's not the national picture. And there's some incredible talent out there across this country who do not realise that the world is their oyster, that they could achieve. And I think whoever gets into power, education has to be such an important part. We really do have to fix this. We have to give kids hope.
Thank you. Let me at this point just say how sorry I am to Emma, Bradley and Christopher. You asked fantastic questions, one on asylum seekers, one on assisted dying and one on poverty. Sadly, we've run out of time. And I'm going to now ask the candidates if they would like to summarise or sum up their position. Now, Daisy, I'm afraid you've ended up first.
Well, thank you all again so much for coming this evening. We made history in 2019 when we ousted the previous Conservative incumbent and we turned St Albans Lib Dem gold for the first time in more than 100 years. And since then, I really hope that I've shown you the difference that a hard-working Lib Dem MP can make. I've responded to more than 35,000 queries from constituents. I've taken our local issues, whether it's pubs, whether it's cladding, the Greenbelt, our high streets, our health services, and I've taken those local issues and put them on the national stage, telling the public and the national and the whole country about the issues that we face here in St Albans. I have communicated to you every week and every month about what I've been doing to work for you. It's been the honour of my lifetime to be your MP, and I hope so much that you'll choose to re-elect me on the 4th of July. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions earlier. It's very difficult to do them justice in just 2 minutes. The Social Democratic Party was founded in 1981, and you're all obviously too young to remember that. Personally, I wasn't even born. It was formed by 4 very, very great politicians who broke away from the Labour Party, but we've never gone away. We didn't merge with the Liberal Democrats a few years later. We kept the faith. We kept the faith of the original Labour Party, not what it's called the Labour Party now. This is my leaflet. It's A5, so it's not very big. If you get one, please look at the bit at the bottom. Look at the website, because we've got a manifesto, and we've also got a young-centred social democrat manifesto, which is worth reading as well. It's a bit more ambitious. The line at the bottom there says, "Are you happy with the way things are?" That comes from the very first social democratic manifesto. I don't think most people are, in which case you need to vote for a change, and we are that change.
Thank you, Stuart. Simon.
The ideas that the Greens stand for and are putting forward in our manifesto are the only ones on offer that are up to the job of fixing our broken country and at the same time facing up to the climate and ecological nature emergencies. And in case you're worrying, could voting Green in St Albans let the Tories in? Stop worrying. The Lib Dems will show you the bar chart from 2019 where they were just ahead of the Conservatives. It looks like it's going to be close, doesn't it? But it won't be. The pollsters are predicting that the Lib Dems here will win over 50% of the vote and the Conservatives probably something around 20%. There are plenty of spaces for Green X's on ballot papers, so please knock yourself out. What's the point, you might ask, of voting for a small party, the Greens, when we're not going to run the country? The question is, what voices do you want in Parliament? There will be Green MPs. What voices do you want holding the inevitable Labour government to account? I say that we need voices that demand immediate, well-funded action to tackle the crises of cost of living, public services and climate. And for me, the Greens are the only people that are doing that, so I urge you to support what we are saying and vote Green.
Sophia.
If, like me, you look around and you think absolutely everything is broken, if, like me, you think we've had enough of 14 years of absolute chaos caused by incompetence and inner-party turmoil, then it's time to vote for that change. And you can use your vote. Your vote counts. It's probably the first time ever, probably, in this constituency that it hasn't had to be tactical. You can vote with your heart. You can vote for the party with an actual plan that's fully costed. You can vote for the only party that's going to unseat the Tories. And you can vote for the party that actually keeps its promises when it gets the keys to number 10. You can vote for the party when it was last in power, brought you Sure Start, the New Deal, the Minimum Wage, the Equalities Act, peace in Northern Ireland, GDP on the growth and living standards rising. If you vote Labour on the 4th of July, what we'll deliver is economic growth, a Britain as a green superpower, safer streets, an opportunity for all, and an NHS fit for the future.
The Liberal Democrats locally are set to irretrievably ruin St Albans. They propose building 15,000 properties to ruin the visual amenity and history of St Albans, with all the infrastructure works and the heightened flood risks to new and old communities and properties alike. The Liberal Democrats have already ruined St Albans' ancient charter market and its once thriving city centre. In collusion with county Tories, they have willfully squandered £7 million on unwanted and unenforceable 20-mile-per-hour speed restriction programmes. All at a time when countless roads in the St Albans area are already pocketed with deep and deepening potholes. If I'm elected as the St Albans Member of Parliament, my immediate focus will be to become St Albans Prince of Potholes. As MP for St Albans, I will get every pothole fixed permanently for the people of St Albans. The Tories have broken Britain. Labour will, as usual, end up bankrupting Britain, just as they've always done before. Only Reform UK is ready to save Britain. Thank you very much.
James.
St Albans is my home. It's where I was born, where I grew up, where I went to school, and where me and my family still live. And I have to pinch myself thinking that this was the stage where I received many school awards and sang in school concerts and played in school orchestras. And now to be standing here as a major party parliamentary candidate is something really special. And it's only special when you consider that it's the values that this city gave me, the values that I was brought up with here, which means that my school motto was everyone can be someone. And it's things like that which has led me on this path today. But if elected MP, I want to promise you 3 things. I will protect the Green Belt. I will fight for investment in this city, not just for things like our heritage assets, like our market, but things like our hospital as well. And the 3rd thing is that my door will always be open. I will be there for any need, any issue that you have. And I promise you more than just emails. I promise you action. I promise you action for your home, because it's my home, and it's the city that I love. Thank you.
Duffy.
In this election, we all know that the Tories are headed for oblivion, and Labour are equally detested, with nothing to offer but a faster trajectory of decline. The key areas of policy for the current parliamentary parties are almost indistinguishable. They're all pushing the same agendas of wokery, mass immigration, and net zero. Once elected, they all return to implement the programs of globalist bodies like the UN, the World Economic Forum, and the World Health Organization, that nobody voted for. The last few years have shown how all establishment parties, even Reform UK to some extent, moved in lockstep to trample on our liberties and escalate war with Russia. This insanity needs to stop, so we don't enter a war that is completely unnecessary and avoidable. We need non-establishment challenger MPs to present real, independent and uncontrolled opposition to the uniparty regime. The Heritage Party stands for real, socially conservative principles, not the fake conservatism of the Tories. Thank you very much.
Will you allow me to thank our candidates? I mean, it is a very difficult thing to do, to stand up there, be interrogated the way we've interrogated them, but can I ask you to join with me in thanking them enormously for the perseverance and the answers they've given us. Could I also, if you'll allow me just one more second, could I also thank those who submitted their questions? Absolutely fabulous. Can I thank Kevin, Joe, and Emma for helping us organise this evening and for allowing us to use this absolutely wonderful facility. Thank you very much. Facilities.